And guys, we have a really special treat here. My favorite broadcaster, probably of all time on games, it's Greg Olsen. Oh, he's also a former tight end, really good one too. A three-time Pro Bowler, a current analyst with Fox Sports, aka the best, he's the best. After being drafted by the Chicago Bears in 2007, Olsen played the majority of his career with the Carolina Panthers. There, he was recognized as one of the league's most productive pass-catching tight ends and helped lead his team to a Super Bowl berth against the Denver Broncos. Inspired by his son's health journey, Greg and his wife Kara co-founded the Hardest Yard Foundation to support families facing congenital heart conditions. Olsen also founded Youth Inc., which he's wearing the hat for. You have to come on the stage next to it. Youth Inc., an integrated media and commerce platform dedicated to youth sports communities. So give it up for Greg Olsen. We're so glad. So Greg, we know that you use data a lot now on your broadcast, but think back to when you were a player. How were you using data 10 years ago, like when this partnership sort of started?
Yeah, I would say we used it significantly different than we do now. Obviously, the technology, the modeling, the access to the information is drastically different now than it was 10 years ago when it was a little bit more on the forefront and more cutting edge. As players, we would sit in scouting meetings, and on every Wednesday, as the coaches or one of the assistants would get up there, and they would present the opponent. And it would be everything from personnel-based, who are they, what do they look like, who are their best players, so on. And then you would get into their tendencies. And obviously, as an offensive player, they're getting up there and they're telling you, all right, on first and second down, these are the types of fronts that they want to play. Here are their tendencies on third down, coverage structures, so on and so forth. The way it was presented to us then, and the way now it's presented to us is drastically different, right? As we all know, things really just, the ability to escalate and evolve over time is not linear. And the information that I now get as a broadcaster, now 5 years after my playing career, when I show it to people, like even people that have lived their entire lives in the NFL and really feel like they understand it, it could be a little mind-blowing. The access to the information, the intricacies, personnel groupings and matchups and league-wide trends or trends just specific to this team or to this matchup, you can really build out any storyline you want. And as a person who has to speak for 3 hours about the game, about the matchup, the ability to have the information back up the storyline, back up what you see as a trend, it just really allows us to speak from a place of a lot more certainty and a lot more confidence that what we're saying is actually backed up by raw data, not just my observations. And early in my career as a player, it was until next gen and until the ability to process all of this data came to be, it really was just observational. It was watching film and your eyes until your eyeballs want to fall out and you're like charting with your hand third down coverages and tendencies and what leverage do they play and how far off does the defensive player play from you, and it's like, I don't know, he seems kind of far, but it was so general. And now it's like, hey, the Dallas Cowboys lead the league in press coverage and the next best team is 1.5 yards, and it's like, wow, that's a pretty fascinating conversation to why, weaving in the what and why of football. And that's the part that I really enjoy. And the more we've woven it into our framework of the games on the broadcast, I think we've seen a even more significant interest from the fans to crave more of it.
That was not on the itinerary.
I know, it was not on the itinerary.
We can talk about anything.
The Tush push? Where do you stand? I'm just curious.
You want me to talk about it?
I actually do want you to. I think they do too.
Brevity is not my thing. I've actually been very clear in these settings or also just on the games. I've called a million. Philadelphia Eagles have really been the one that have brought it to the forefront. You go back to their couple Super Bowl runs, even the year that they lost years back, and then obviously just a year ago winning it. So they've been really at like the top of the conversation just because they've exploited it really better than anybody else has, especially in the early days, and led to a lot of success. My position on it is this: it is not as universally easy, it's not as easy across the board as everyone wants to make it out to be. The Eagles, from a personnel standpoint and just from an ability to they've been able to weave the fundamental aspect of having an extra down into the notion of when they possess the ball, it's like 1st and 8.5. And I think the first time we presented that on one of our broadcasts back in 22, their first Super Bowl run, I think a lot of people said, okay, that makes sense to me, right? Every time they possess the ball, somewhere around the minus 40-yard line where it's like 4 down mode, every time they got the ball, it was 1st and 8.5. And what that does to play calling, what that does to situational gamesmanship and third down strategy and third down defenses that you would see. And it's just a trickle-down effect. It was more than just the play. It was more than just pushing Jalen Hurts to get a yard or two, to get a fresh set of downs or score a touchdown down tight. It was the entire framework and philosophy of how they've built their entire roster, how they've managed to call plays, play sequencing, decision-making, so on and so forth. So to remove that from a team who's been able to really exploit that into all decisions they make throughout the course of a game, I thought was a disadvantage, because when you look around the league, teams have not, over large sample sizes over the last couple of years, teams have not had the same amount of success the Eagles have had. And I think to remove it because you don't like it aesthetically or you don't like is an entirely different argument. But I just think when teams find a way to play to their advantages and it works with their scheme and their personnel and their quarterback and their center, and then they can then take the next level, which is every other element of how they build their offensive game plan and strategy of the game based on their ability to get a free yard or two, I give them a lot of credit. So I've been a proponent for keeping it in the game. And if it was so easy, I think we'd see everybody do it, but certainly you don't.
See, aren't you guys glad I asked that question? It's a good one. But actually that brings up a little bit about process. So when you're working with our Next Gen Stats team now, just give us a little bit of insight as a broadcaster, what information you're given and kind of how it all works.
Yeah. So actually, a lot of the guys that I work closely with, they're here today. Keegan and Jack and Bill, and so it's actually cool. I get to see them at these conferences, and we get to. I get to like nerd out with people that I really don't understand what you're doing, but I get to take the information that you're producing. So
he understands. He's lying.
No, so the way I look at it is like my job as a broadcaster is to be like the conduit, right? So I don't know what Python is. I have no idea what Michael's talking about. But producing the information is not my job, right? So there's really smart people that understand the collection of the data, the processing of the data, and then somehow filtering through it. By the time I get it, it's gone through multiple layers that then when my football brain studies the packet they send me every week in anticipation of our end of the week Zoom call where I get on with the team and we kick ideas, and it's almost like I'm almost like testing my theories out to make sure that they're supported. And so many times on a Monday or Tuesday, I have this really good thought in my head about a trend, either for the game or maybe a trend that I see going on around the league that I want to dive into. Sometimes based on the information that Keegan and the team send me by Friday, it's not as good as I thought it was in my brain. So the ability to workshop it and be able to then rely on them to say, am I crazy? Because what I'm seeing, I feel pretty strongly about, and when the data does support my theory, you know you're onto something and you can really push and drive forward. But oftentimes they'll say, hey, you might feel that way, small sample size, not really what we're seeing league-wide, and that will move down my, kind of my list of priorities. So I've said this not only when I've done events with you guys, but just across the board, like my ability to do the job, and to do the job at a level that I feel proud of, and to do it at a level that I feel is, contributes to the broadcast, especially for the fan, for the viewer. I could not do it at that level without this team, without the Next Gen group, without the information, without their ability to interpret it and feed it to me, and then collectively workshop through that through the rest of the week. So it is not just a part of my prep, it is really the foundation of my prep. And as we brought some of these storylines and some of these more like advanced analytic ideas into the broadcast, what I've felt and what the feedback that we've gotten with our crew over the last 5 years is there is a significant appetite for more. And I don't know if they want to see like I don't know what Python is. I'm just going to assume it's some sort of like data analytics machine.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever that is. I don't know if the viewer necessarily is ready to compute that.
Nope, absolutely
right?
not.
They don't have, I don't understand that, but if done through the right filters and channels, and then ultimately through the broadcaster and like we're that final conduit to the viewer, if done correctly, I just think it's a really fun way to study trends and tendencies and present the game in a manner that maybe the casual fan at home had never really stopped to consider is actually what's playing out. some of us to talk about the game. Let's not get crazy. If you're replacing the broadcasters, I'm not going to give you a very good report.
What you're doing is saying, hey, this is what might happen.
Yeah, and to play on that, no, I'm obviously joking, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I talked about like my prep, Cynthia, you asked me about like the prep and the workshopping, but then ultimately the game is all that matters. During the game that I'm calling, every single one over the last 4 or 5 years, Keegan and his team off-site is piped directly into my booth, and my partner, who's my brother, he's next to me, and he has a direct line to them. So with a simple push of a button, right? So early in the game, I like to call it, we like set the table of, okay, here are the matchups, here are the storylines, here are how each team should support the game, and blah, blah, blah. But then the game happens, right? So you can do, no different as a player, you can do all the work that you want, and then the ball's kicked off, and most of the time that all goes out the window. And the game sometimes does go the way you lay it out, and oftentimes it could go contrary to the way you lay it out. But the ability to have real-time now support, not just from Monday through Saturday, but now when the game plays for the entire 3 hours, I have constant feedback and interaction with the next gen team, Keegan and the guys. So what I'm seeing now in the game, maybe it's different, contrary to what I had thought was going to be the way the Patriots play defense or coverage units or whatever the storyline you built out leading up to the game. If it's playing out that way, here now is the data to support. Remember we said at the first quarter, we came onto the game about how Mike Vrabel wants to stop the Kansas City passing game. Well, here it is. This is how it's played out over the last 2.5 quarters. Or, hey, coming into the game, they played this style. Today is a completely different approach for whoever, Steve Spagnuolo. Like, this is very different. Why? So whether it aligns with what you predict going into the game or it doesn't, there's still an ability to weave in storytelling, and the only way you can do that with confidence that what you think you see is actually what's happening is because with a simple press of the button, I can ask, I probably shouldn't say this, I should probably just say, I know all of this in my head, but I don't. I ask these guys, hey, tell me what's going on. First down, it looks like every 1st and 10 is a pass play. Am I crazy? Hey, 6 of the first 7 have been a pass. They're averaging 4.5 yards, done. I now can speak from such a position of confidence that it can bring value to the viewer who may or may not have noticed it, and if they did, now they can really be sure that's really what's happening. So the real-time game stuff is critical.
I mean, it's great for broadcast. Teams can't use it, unfortunately. That's like a CBA
True,
thing.
that's true. I don't care. I don't work for a team.
That's right.
We use
That's
it.
exactly right. That's
Too bad, teams.
If you could have a wish for a new stat or something we could track, Greg, what would it be?
Me?
Yeah.
God, I'm not sure I'm the guy. Isn't that why we're here? I
Well,
think there's a lot
okay,
more smart people out here that are trying to solve those issues.
I'm telling you, they want to know what you have to say.
It's a great question. I wish I would have had prep for that. I would have put some good thought into it. I think there's such an element that I've really, me and Keegan were actually talking about it before, because I think it came out of the Big Data Bowl years ago, is, I think we're starting to see so many stats that get put, especially into the broadcast, especially with like the built-in graphics mid-game. And you hear a lot about like over-expected. And the idea of being able to analyze a player or a play off huge, data rolls and huge, amount of and be able to say, okay, the average player, more times than not, this is going to be a 4-yard gain or a 15-yard pass or whatever the case may be. The ability now to analyze every player, play, instance, run, pass, catch, and be able to kind of like baseline it over what should have happened in this. I think it's such a better way to evaluate performance. I think it's a great way to evaluate coaching. I think some of the coolest things that we've tracked this year, and again, this is a little more like archaic, just extrapolating from different models and stuff, but certain coaches tend to always be a little bit higher, for example, on like yards before contact, right? So when we're evaluating running backs, for example, in the old days, it was like, hey, he rushed for 110 yards, you got to pay him this amount of money. He rushes for 85 yards. He's not nearly as good. Well, we all know now raw yardage and raw output is really inconsequential. It really means nothing. So we can now really get into, okay, what teams have a lot of yards before contact? Is that scheme generated? Is that offensive line generated? Yards after contact? Okay, now we're getting into like how good is the actual running back? Or is he just a beneficiary of the system? And I think for as long as sports has been played, the argument has been made, is this player really good or is he a product of the system? Well, I think with our ability now to break out different elements of plays, we can almost assign the success or lack thereof to certain elements of the play. And if I have a running back that's really good before contact and really good before the line of scrimmage, but he's not necessarily as good 3 yards post, I'm starting to say, how good is this guy? I could probably put somebody else at running back and my production wouldn't necessarily look much different. And so I think being
Guys,
able
he's one
to,
of us.
no, but I think that's a fact. Now, of course, on the broadcast, I would never say all of that, but it's a really cool way to
He's
get
one
into.
of us. He just
no,
showed
but
it.
here's a great real time, and I don't know how much time we have, but whatever.
I love this.
So here's a really, for example, last year with Philadelphia getting Saquon Barkley, okay? So they win the Super Bowl, and of course, everyone's losing their minds about the run game, and should he be the MVP, and he was incredible. But when you look back on the years prior, one thing the Philadelphia Eagles was always very good at is from an analytical basis, they might not have run for as many yards with Miles Sanders or Kenneth Gainwell, whoever it was, but they were always very good yards before contact. They were always very good, whether it's not taking negative plays or kind of the intricacies of run game. Well, now you take a historically talented player who maybe in New York did most of his damage after contact, after the catch, past the line of scrimmage, and you go, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This is a historically great offensive line with a historically great run scheme because of personnel, formations, all that. And now you put in a historically great running back behind all of that, and this is why it's so special, and this is why they're in the Super Bowl. That was very hard to quantify. We all saw it. We all knew years ago that was happening. It was hard to present that, but now we can tell that story about Saquon Barkley being added to this Philadelphia offense without getting into yards per expected and the real nuts and bolts, but speak about it in a storytelling capacity that I think is a lot better than just saying, Saquon Barkley's really good, Jalen Hurts squats a lot, and Lane Johnson's the best. We know, but tell us more about why it matters. The data is what allows us to tell those stories in a little bit more of an interesting way, if that makes sense. I feel like I should be facing that way and I can spin around when I hear something that I like.
Oh.
Next year,
The
budget's going to be so much higher. The NFL has so much money.
Yeah, we definitely.
The NFL has unlimited money. We can get spinning chairs. But
Right.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
What are you most excited for other than next year's spinning chairs?
Other than the chairs. I'll be honest, I don't really know what to expect. I have no idea what the 4 finalists' projects are, or models are, I don't know what we call it. I'm just fascinated to see what people come up with. I always think the best rooms to be in are the rooms where you're really low at the bottom as far as smart people. So being in these rooms of people who can push the game forward, innovate, whether it's rule change, player safety, the way coaches coach, the way coaches manage game time decisions. Obviously there's a lot of conversation right now going on around the league. I found myself in a monster Twitter battle weeks back. It got weird, it got intense. I'm never doing that again over should you go for 2? I had people threatening me. I was this is bananas.
This is a great room for that.
I don't know if you guys are ever
during the
familiar
judging
with
time.
social media. You guys familiar? Yeah, so I just think it's super cool to be around people that understand the ability to push the game forward and just continue to change ways that we can tell these stories, to Julie's point. And I feel like that's our greatest role as a broadcaster, not to tell the game that I played. My job is not to tell the game the way I see it necessarily, or the way I was taught it, or the way I played it. It's my job to interpret and tell the game the way it's being played today. And that's what we owe the fans, that's what we owe the viewer. A lot of people are hesitant to that. They don't like change, they don't like being told the game is not being played the way it was when they were kids. And that's unfortunate because no matter how hard people push back, this is real. This is what every single team in the NFL is basing a lot of their decision making, a lot of their personnel evaluations here at the Combine are all being viewed off of these analytical trends, and it's here to stay. And the teams that have adopted the quickest have tended to have the most success, and some of the late adopters are trying to play catch up.
If you want a Twitter battle, you could ask the crowd if they should take the ball or defer the ball in overtime. That's just for later if you want to get into a Twitter battle. But Mike, no, I don't need your
I don't know, I
answer.
got into a 2-point battle if you're down by 15, and you would have thought I insulted their mother.
Oh, for
Now,
sure.
they're still wrong, but we can't teach, we can't help everybody, right, guys?
Nope.
You gotta be willing to help yourself. There's a lot of people out there that are unwilling to help themselves, and it's not my fault they want to be wrong, and we all move on.